Well, he grew up in New York City, which is under the powers of Hitler and the Nazi regime. So, I mean, he knows nothing different. I mean, he would have been raised to be in the Nazi youth and to be bred as a soldier. So, it's just kind of the way of life. I think that's just the norm. You're going to watch him be conflicted with the decisions he has to make and the people he meets and the things that come into his path. So, yeah, you're gonna watch him struggle. You're gonna watch him struggle with the decisions he has to make and whether or not he chooses to go along with the Nazis and whether he chooses not to.
We go sort of between, to be traveling within San Francisco, New York, and the neutral zone, to see the inner lives of these people and yeah, it's all there. It's all there, but Frank is sort of rolling it out very quietly and gently in little pieces, little pieces, little pieces. So.
Well, the thing about Nazis, I think there's a misconception. I think the Nazi Party was never meant to be bad. It was about the culture. It was about bringing the German culture back to what they were after the Depression, and it was good. It was about the economy. I think it wasn't until Hitler and he created this kind of he became a demon and he had too much power, so he kind of ruined the German culture. But so being a Nazi, I think it's an honorable thing for Joe. I watched a lot of documentaries on Hitler and on people during that time, and I read a bunch of books. I went to the Holocaust Museum just to kind of see, and I've been a few times. I've been there as a kid too, just to see what the people went through and kind of that mentality of occupation. Yeah, it's very weighing on your soul to see all that and read all that, but it really does help influence your character, and I think it makes a greater story. He didn't participate in the war, so I don't know how much he really knows about, I think he knows about the camps and the concentration camps and all these things that happen. I think his knowledge, but they kind of all just trust the Fuhrer and everything that he says, and everything he says is, pretty much essentially God, and that's the word. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that was a new thing to him. You're gonna slowly watch him find out things and explore things in the Nazi world that he didn't really know, and it's going to be really interesting. We've tried to make it as real as possible. We tried to create this world that it was just, be just like today and age, and it's not a terrible world. It's actually a very simple world. I mean, it would be like having one news station, to be like having Fox is the only news station to give you information, and you live your daily lives based on what they say, and you just go to work, you do your job, and you do your thing, and you keep your head low. Right. But in some ways that's beautiful in a way because it's so simple. Right. You don't have all these other. I mean, you really don't have any voice or expression. You're kind of told what to do, and it's kind of a simple life.
In episode 2, I get tortured for a whole episode. Stripped naked. The general kind of torture scenes. So it was good. In the book, in the Philip K. Dick book, in the book, and in Manor High Castle, we follow him and how he deals with art and how it works in that world. Really, So it's all about freedom of speech. Well, I think we capture the world very well of the book, and I hope we stay true to Philip K. Dick's sort of beliefs and on the alternative world and alternative views. And I think we do that. It's crazy. Nazi America occupied by Nazis and Japanese is a kind of crazy idea. And I think it takes people there and it really shows the reality of what it would be like.
Well, I think it was changing it from a book to films, which was actually the first thing that occurred to me. That creates a much more literal mystery than the novel had. But I think, the best part of the show is sort of the reality of living in this alternate world. Mm-hmm. And when you can bring home to people like, oh my God, what if this had happened? What would I do in these circumstances? And there are themes from the novel about what reality is and what it means to be human that I find deeply moving. And I'm always trying to find ways to steer the narrative toward those themes. The world that is in this book is so inhuman, right? Like living under a fascist ideology where you can be killed because of your race or your sexuality or your handicap is so brutal and dehumanizing. And it's not like, Gandhi could shame the British, right, into surrendering India, or Martin Luther King could shame America into desegregating. You can't shame the Nazis. And what do you do? What is the proper response? You know, what would you do? And most of us would do nothing. You know, and that's terrifying. And that's not something we as Americans like to think about. It makes us very uncomfortable. And I suspect that's probably why the project had a hard time finding a home, because it's not something we want to think about ourselves. We're the good guys. This wouldn't happen to us. And it's like, and you know, and that was the Germans. They were the Nazis. They're the bad guys. It's like, no, we're all people, and this could happen anywhere. And that's what I find exciting about the show is making people think.
In the book, you know, there's no real resistance. There's maybe some spiritual resistance, but we've incorporated that as well, which is kind of tricky because, you know, you don't want to make it seem as though it's about an uprising and about people, you know, getting their country back. That's not, you know, the goal, or that's not what we're going to end up with. So, but how do you show resistance in different ways, spiritually, emotionally, you know, other things other than physical violence?
We originally developed this, the first incarnation was developed for the BBC, and we really had no resistance presence at all. So in many ways, to make it at all palatable for an American audience, that element was essential.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would be very disappointed if people looked at the show and said, well, what do the films mean? I mean, that's an element of it, but it's not the point. You know, it's the MacGuffin, the films. It's the excuse for a plot, but it's really about who we are. You know, especially an American audience, you're looking at that very uncomfortable place where we are almost like the world that we see in this show, and looking at the parts of it that are appealing, and processing that. Why is that appealing? And you know, what would I do if I were in that world? Would I resist? Would I go along? All the things that most of us don't like to think about.